Chris Lee of Southeastern 14 here with my friend William Drummond, the man behind the SEC baseball account. My friend, conference plays among us. It has snuck up amidst March Madness and spring practice and all kinds of wild and crazy stuff in the SEC.
Yep, it's here. And honestly, I don't know if this is just me, but I feel like there's almost more questions now than we had before opening day.
Yeah.
But we've had 4 good weeks of baseball, and now we'll really crank it up.
I like the way you put that because there are things that cause questions. One of them is injuries, unfortunately, and we're going to talk about that quickly. The other is what I think is potentially more balanced than we thought coming into the year, maybe less gap between the top and the bottom and maybe a very confused middle. But, that's also from February and early March baseball, which isn't always the best indicator of where seasons are headed. But it's interesting, and we're going to get to that part in a minute. But first, the injuries. Boy, it's been an epidemic across college baseball, William. We saw it before the season started with Peyton Pallette at Arkansas. We saw it with Blade Tidwell at Tennessee. And now at Mississippi State, I think what we feared has come to fruition with Landon Sims getting hurt. He's done for the year with the UCL. Same week, Stone Simmons, who I think was serving as State's closer for the time being, now out for the year. Blake Money has been hurt, although that sounds like a wrist injury, which is really odd. I don't remember ever hearing – I'm sure I've heard it, but usually when you have wrist injuries, you have them with hitters, and you hope that's all it is. It sounds like if that's all it is, it's not severe. But, boy, State with injuries to Sims and Simmons, that was devastating. And you hate it for both those guys too.
Yeah, both of those came on that same weekend down in Tulane. Then they get back, get it tested, get some second opinions, and I think they both announced on the same day. So that's not only your best starter, but probably their best bullpen arm. We didn't even touch on Connor Prelip because it's been, year or two we haven't had him. And then, and it's not just the SEC. I know, Texas lost their Sunday guy. But it seems like it's affecting everybody. Hicks at South Carolina's out. Bosnick sounds like he's going to be back, but he's missed some time. So that's definitely been an unfortunate theme so far this year.
Georgia's got a guy out too, I think. I think Georgia's third starter. Isn't he done too for a while?
Yeah, I want to say I did see that. I'm not 100% sure. I know at one point we were counting down just the Friday guys.
Yeah.
And it was pretty significant. Like we mentioned, I think it was when Money got hurt. We mentioned that.
Yeah.
But, fortunately, his doesn't seem to be as bad. But yeah, it just seems like it's the injury bug's kind of biting everybody.
Yeah, this is wonderful podcasting. Me think of something stream of conscious, totally blanking on the guy's name and putting you on the spot. But anyway, it's been that kind of season where you can barely keep up with what's going on everywhere.
Yeah, it really has.
And I think that there's got to be a general feeling that the pandemic-shortened season of 2020 is just still throwing everything a little bit off. I know it's not just that. You have higher velocities and more guys getting hurt than ever because that's strain on the arm. But you do wonder if 2020 plays out normally, not just what would have happened there, because that was going to be a phenomenal season in the SEC. But you do wonder how much that has to do with what's happening right now too.
Yeah, I don't know. That obviously affects rosters a ton just in terms of the amount of guys. So there's that's still some lingering effects there for sure.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's caught my eye is just the parity. And again, I'm not going to make any conclusions until we get a few weeks of SEC play. Even that, there's disparity in who teams are going to face. But, we thought before the season, like I wasn't really confident about Auburn and Alabama. And it wasn't because I think those programs are awful or anything. Don't get me wrong. It's just because you look across the league and go, well, they got to play this team and that team. And, these 8 teams are in the top 25 and just the issues that everybody knows. But you've seen Alabama go to Texas and darn near win a series. You've seen Auburn is hit really well. Sonny DeChara's had a phenomenal year. The pitching has been way better than we expected. I would say, in fact, Auburn's pitching has been easily a top 5 surprise in the league. South Carolina, I wasn't feeling great about them. A couple weeks ago, they take 2 or 3 from Texas last weekend. Knock off the number 1 team in the country. And Julian Bosnick isn't even pitching. That's another one. Kentucky has taken a series from TCU. Mm-hmm. Missouri hasn't played anybody yet, but the results have been much better. I mean, last year Missouri was so bad that Missouri, when it wasn't playing anybody, it was still losing. A&M's the team to me that's disappointed because I was hoping things would get better under Jim Schlossnagle. I'm just thinking they might be a year or 2 away. But I think that's the thing that stuck out to me. Like, and even at the top of the league, State's been an enigma. We thought Tennessee was middle of the pack. Now Tennessee's looking upper crust. I mean, it's just, to me, I think that's exciting because we're going into this, like in football, it's like, well, sometimes an LSU and Auburn or somebody will fade, but you're not going to see, Vanderbilt step up or Mississippi State in a year where it's picked 7th in the West step up and challenge. But I feel like this year you're legitimately seeing, it feels like a month in, more parity. We'll see how it plays out, but that's the way it reads to me right now.
Yeah, I definitely think it does. I mean, the top of the league doesn't feel quite as strong as we thought it was coming in. The bottom of the league feels a little bit better than we thought, which, like you mentioned, I think that's good for us in terms of the product we're going to get and the competition on the field. I think that's great. It is kind of hard to say given that, not everybody's playing equal competition there, so we'll kind of find out some things as we go. But so far through 4 weeks, I mean, there's definitely been some significant surprises there. I know you mentioned Auburn and their pitching. They kind of laid an egg this past weekend, but as a whole, that staff has looked really, really good. I think when we had it circled at the beginning of the year, Ole Miss going to Auburn, they're that Thursday, Friday, Saturday series, so that's going to be the opening SEC game of the year. I don't think we had a lot of hopes for that one being a tight one. Now, even though Auburn's coming off a loss to Middle Tennessee State, Ole Miss is number 1 in the country. That feels a lot tighter than it did 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, I apologize. I just kind of took the best options off the menu there for surprises. But what are things, like, as you're thinking about that maybe I didn't get to that have caught your eye that you're like, I didn't necessarily see that one coming?
Yeah, I think I'd probably go Kentucky and Auburn are 2 you mentioned, but I think I'd probably go Tennessee. There was a lot of back and forth about where Tennessee should be ranked and all of that because they did lose a ton last year, so they got some preseason love, but it wasn't a ton, and it wasn't one of those that we don't think this team's any good or we don't think they can do it. It's just so many unproven guys that are going to have to step up, and whether that's transfers, whether that's freshmen, whether that's JUCO guys. It's a lot of, how do these pieces fit together? Are they clicking at the end of the year and, it takes a little bit to get going? Do they click from day one? There's just a lot of unknown there. And so far they've been red hot. I mean, I think they lead the league in most runs scored and have the best ERA. So I don't know if anybody would have projected that through 4 weeks. So I'd probably go with them. And then State's slow start. Obviously the injuries to Simmons and Sims, are significant, but they were having issues before that. So they play a pretty tough schedule. We'll see if that's, something they're going to kind of settle in and figure out, or if this is going to kind of be a rocky season following the national championship.
I want to circle back to Tennessee. The Vols have scored, let me look this up to make sure it's right. Yeah, 204 runs and given up 41. Now, Tennessee has also played some really bad baseball teams. Mm-hmm. So you and I have watched college baseball long enough not to make conclusions, but Tennessee's bringing the bats every night, and I have a feeling that it's going to be a good offensive club. I think we've established that. And you look like Jared Dickey. Was he anywhere on your radar before this season? Because he was not on mine. He redshirted a year ago. Now he's leading the league in average. He's second in slugging. He's second in on base. That was you think you got stuff figured out, right? And you're going, well, the leaderboard a month in is probably going to look like Dylan Cruz and Trey Morgan and, Tim Elko and Jacob Gonzalez and, Robert Moore and all the names we know. Jared Dickey sitting here a month into the season and being on the leaderboards after not playing a year ago is just, to me, it's it's been a pretty cool story so far.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of one of those things that you can be the biggest Tennessee fan out there, and even you're not going to necessarily predict that from your new guys. So that's one of those things that there were a lot of questions around Tennessee. They appear to have answered them pretty well. I think you said they've got, I can't remember how many runs it was. I think Kentucky is second with like 164, which is like 40 behind. By far the biggest gap in the league. Like you mentioned, they haven't played the strongest competition, but there's a lot of other teams that haven't played the strongest competition that aren't necessarily putting up 200 runs.
Yeah, Trey Lipscomb leading the league in RBIs by 8 at this point. Not another one that I had on my bingo card. And another kid who waited his time, right? I mean, I think they thought he had some talent, but you never know. I mean, 204 runs. I mean, like, give Tennessee another week. That's as many runs as some teams are going to score all year. It's just absurd.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, they played. I think it was Iona that significantly struggled, but they're putting up those runs on a lot of teams. It's not, everybody was saying, oh, it's the ballpark, it's the teams they're playing. They went to Minute Maid and hit. They're hitting home runs in that ballpark too. So that's not, it's not like they're just benefiting from a light schedule or from a hitter-friendly park or anything like that.
Well, the guy that some of these guys are looking at up on the leaderboard is Sonny DeChiara. I hope I pronounced that right, or DeChiara, maybe, at Auburn, slugging 1.026, on-base percentage of .607, which is just crazy. He's third in the league on average at .462. Now, he had really raked at Samford, if I recall, but what a season he's had. And Auburn's just the team that I know they lost to Middle Tennessee State last weekend. MTSU is not very good, I don't think. But I just look at what Auburn has done, not just with the bats, but the pitching. And that, to me, I think we're both really high on Butch Thompson. I think everybody is.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a team that, that got me down about them a little bit. But I'm just intrigued enough with what I have seen from them. They did get the first or second weekend, played really well. Took a couple of games, I think, from a Big 12.
Out in Texas.
Yeah, that's what it was. It's starting to run together.
Yeah, they had understand. Yeah, they had the big win, highlighted by the win over Texas Tech. And you look at their pitching numbers, and it's easy to say, they're pitching it well. They're not playing great teams, but I mean, they went out there and pitched really well against Oklahoma, Texas Tech, Kansas State in weekend one, and maybe that's the benefit of a little early season rust on offenses, but I mean they've continued to pitch it really well, and like you mentioned, that's something we kind of expected from a Butch Thompson team. But they've had some transfers step in and hit really well, and maybe a little bit better than we anticipated. You'll see some guys kind of do that and taper off in SEC play, so that's still something worth monitoring. But that's another really really nice surprise for Auburn.
Yeah, they've got some pitching depth. I guess the guy that's been the best so far has been Trace Brights. By the way, we didn't mean to slight the Vols on the mound. They've been really good there too.
Pitched really well.
Chase Burns. I'll tell you what. If he stays healthy, top 5, top 10 pick. A couple of classes from now.
Yeah.
I know that's no revelation because he was a guy that would have been a first or second round pick had he really wanted to go, I guess. But I mean, you watch him and he's legit.
Yeah, he's one of those I'm really interested to see in SEC play because I mean there's this day and age there's high profile freshmen that are in the rotation every year. You see a couple, and there's some guys run into trouble there. Everybody kind of hits a wall a little bit in some regard. No matter who you are, that's just the nature of the SEC. But I'm really interested to see kind of how he does in the SEC once we hit week 5, week 6, week 7, and he gets kind of in the gauntlet of that.
William, I think we're going to go into weekend predictions in a minute, and that'll give us a chance to talk about every team. But State, just the big news item in the league so far, I think, with just the start not being what they'd hoped. There are weeks where they look like they're getting it together, and then the pitching injuries struck, and the bats have been kind of up and down. Again, I'm not calling them out because these things are normal baseball things this early. Although I think with State, you had the bar raise a little higher because of winning a national title and all those things. But I'm just curious, if the Sims and the Simmons injuries are things that they can reasonably overcome, and still have the kind of season that they thought they wanted coming in. I mean, I don't know that any team in the conference could stand losing the conference pitcher of the year and not have their season affected in a pretty substantial way.
Yeah, I think that probably affects the ceiling of this team. You know, playing at Duty Noble, that's one of those that, when you're playing postseason games at home there, I mean, it's like playing with an extra man on the field. So, if you've got Sims, if you've got that full staff going on the road, if you have to, it's not that big of a deal. It just feels like the margin for error shrunk a lot. That's not a team. The bullpen hasn't been good. And obviously things can change as the season progresses. I think me and you were talking about this off air, and they seem to, historically have been kind of peaking at the right time, dating back to when Cohen was the head coach there. They've had some teams that kind of exceeded expectations in playoffs. So, if we think a lot differently of them come postseason, I won't be surprised. But it feels like the start they've had so far has kind of put them behind the 8 ball and probably made playing at home in the postseason a little bit trickier. The guys that have stepped up, Preston Johnson, he's made 2 starts. Your average year, if he's your Friday night guy, you're probably not ecstatic about it, but he's been good. He's a serviceable guy. He logs a lot of innings. He was one of their best bullpen arms last year. Cade Smith on Sunday, he's been really good. The numbers aren't the loudest, but I mean, for a Sunday guy, he's got a 2.05 ERA and 23 strikeouts over 22 innings. I think he's gone 5 innings in every start he's made. I mean, if you're getting that on your Sunday guy, you'll take that. And then I think kind of the wild card is Parker Stinnett. The stuff is really, really good, but it seems like it takes him a minute to get settled in. They've used him out of the bullpen, and it hasn't always gone great. But he made 2 starts this past week, which is kind of rare to see a guy do 2 starts in a week. 12 strikeouts in each of them. One of them was against Texas Tech in the midweek. One of them was against Princeton on Sunday. And I mean, he looked really good. The stuff is there. 36 strikeouts over 17 innings, but he flirts with the walks a little bit. He may load the bases in the first inning, but if he can get through it and settle in, he tends to be all right. But that's kind of a dangerous game playing with some of these SEC offenses.
Well, it just feels like roller coaster is the theme in Starkville already. So he's the appropriate front man for the band there, I think.
Yeah, that's right. And the offense seems to be coming around a little bit. They've got talent on that offense. I know over the last 9 games, they've scored 9+ in 6 of them after not doing much of that. And, the first start of the season, the freshman Hunter Hines has been really good. And then some of those veteran guys that kind of scuffled to start the year are starting to heat up a little bit.
Did I see he hit a ball with like 115 exit velo a couple of weeks ago?
You did. Yeah.
That's crazy.
I don't know if that was the one. He hit one against Texas Tech, dead center, that you don't see a lot of freshmen do. You don't see a lot of college guys, period, do. But he's a guy they talked about a lot in the offseason. It seems like the past couple of years they've had some of those guys at freshmen that they really like. But, I mean, it's non-conference, so you can't put a ton of weight on it. But so far he looks like the best hitter in that lineup. Obviously, you've got some other guys, like I said, that are starting to figure it out and kind of hit their stride. Kellum Clark, he started like 0 for 16 or something, and then had like a 3 home run week and kind of seemed to get his groove back. And then some of those other veteran guys have looked a little bit better, but I'll be interested to see them at Georgia this weekend for sure.
Yeah, we'll get into that one in a little bit. Let's go ahead and hop into these series. And I'll start with the one that starts on Thursday night. And in my mind, I mean, I'm looking forward to all these, but I think this is top 2, if not number 1. Ole Miss going to Auburn. Ole Miss number 1 in the country. Maybe it's kind of by default right now, but who cares, right? If you're number 1, you're doing something right. And we both believed in this club coming into the season. Auburn, we spoke about Auburn a lot before. I think you told me today Ole Miss had not won in Auburn since something like 2009, which is crazy.
Yeah, that's somebody sent that my way on Twitter, which is very surprising because there's been some really good Ole Miss teams in there.
Yeah,
and there's been some down Auburn teams in that span. but yeah, they haven't won on the Plains since '09. And then, just looking at it this year, granted it's a pretty small sample size, but they're 2-2 on the road, 13-3 overall. They just they haven't played as well on the road. They haven't played the strongest schedule. But I want to say it's, at home they're averaging over 11 runs a game. On the road they're averaging like 4.5. Like we said, small sample size. One bad day kind of can tank some of those numbers, but that's something worth monitoring for sure. And Auburn will have to pitch it better than they did against Middle Tennessee State, but I think that's something we would expect them to do. I know Joseph Gonzalez, I think, is he's to be TBD for Game 2. Sounds like he's dealing with a blister on his finger. So nothing major, but may hold him out for a week. I think he came out after like an inning this past weekend. But I think if they could get him, they need to be full strength for that game. But I'll be really interested to see kind of how Ole Miss responds. They dropped the midweek to Southeastern Louisiana. There's been some clamoring from the Ole Miss fans and people poking fun that maybe the number 1 spot is a jinx, because I think they got it last year for a week and then promptly lost a road series to somebody. So I don't know if they would necessarily want that, but I think they kind of had the target on their back, whether they're number 1 or 2 or 3. I mean, you're a top 5 team going on the road in the SEC. You better strap it up.
It doesn't. I mean, Ole Miss is a legitimately good national title contending team until I see that it's not. But I mean, and Jacob Gonzalez is having a tremendous year. They've, losing Kevin Graham. Kevin Graham is probably, I don't know, maybe the most underappreciated player in the league. I mean, he had that 61 game on base streak. He just has been so consistent, not flashy, but just a guy that gets on base at that clip is just a phenomenal value. I feel like this is a moment of truth for Auburn pitching, though, because that lineup, again, I think that top to bottom, 1 to 9, it might be the most balanced in the league.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, I know Graham's out for like a month, so fortunately they should get him back. But he's just, he's a guy that anchors that lineup. But even with him out, you've got Elko, you've got McCants. They're so deep, man. So same, like you mentioned, Auburn, kind of a moment of truth. They've performed well, but some of those non-conference teams that you let load the bases and then you kind of squeak out of, you might not do that against Ole Miss. That lineup will make you pay a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, and then I'm interested to see their bats. They've hit the ball pretty well, but some of that's been against lesser pitching. We'll see. I know Gaddis has moved into that Friday role for Ole Miss, and then Diamond on Saturday. I don't think they have I think they're going TBA for Sunday for the time being. But that's a staff that's, I don't want to say it's looked great or worried you or anything like that, but they've been kind of ho-hum against lesser competition. So we'll find out a little bit more about them as well going into the weekend.
South Carolina goes to Tennessee. My dog is really fired up about it, as you can hear. And, I mean, to me, this would be a little bit more intriguing. It is anyway, because I want to see, okay, did South Carolina find something it's tapped into? And for Tennessee, that's a good pitching staff to test your offense and get to see if it's legit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason I'm not excited, and I know the ball gets out at Founders Park some too, but I would have, if I had my druthers, I'd like to see this in South Carolina, because that probably, maybe it tells me a little more, because I feel like Tennessee's the better team. But I think this will be a tremendous series based on what Tennessee's done for the season and what Carolina flashed last weekend. And I guess Julian Bosnick's still out for the weekend. Do we know for sure?
I haven't seen anything on him back, so I'm under the assumption that he's not going to be back for this one, unless I've missed something. But I think the latest on that is that he's working his way back, but not quite there yet. But they've still got Will Sanders. He looked good against Texas. Becker, I think, was the guy that threw the rubber game for that game 2, that Sunday doubleheader. He looked really good. 6 innings, 1 hit against number 1 Texas in a rubber game. I want to say he's the one that gave up the homer to Melendez that went literally 490 something feet.
Wow.
I think that's the only hit he gave up. He was and it was a 7-inning doubleheader. So he came in and was really, really good. So I'll be interested to see how he follows that up. They'll trade one UT for another, and then they've got Braswell, the freshman, who
Oh, he's phenomenal.
it's early. It's early to have this conversation, but I mean, I think you'd put him at the SEC Freshman of the Year front runner right now. He's hitting 429. He's a two-way guy. Still hasn't allowed an earned run on the mound. Granted, 4 innings, but when you're hitting 429, you claim the two-way status. And
Yeah.
I know he closed down I think it was game 2 against Texas, which was a tight game, and he came in and he looked really good. And it just seems like that guy's in the middle of everything. Every time they need a big play or a big hit or anything like that, he seems to find a way to be involved somehow.
Yeah, as a sidebar, I feel like the freshman of the year conversation is going to be fascinating for some names we've named and some I'll get to as we get to previews. Mississippi State, Georgia, awfully good series. I think that's in the running too. State we've talked about. Georgia, I think we're both a little disappointed in. I think we thought Georgia had a chance to march more towards elite status rather than just kind of good. I thought they could potentially be national seed good. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like the bats. People didn't trust the bats, right? I said, hey, look, these guys have played ball for forever. Now Ben Anderson's having a good year. They got Collins and the Tate brothers. I'm not saying they're bad because they're not, but I wanted to see. Oh, they've scored 122 runs. That's not bad in 17 games. And the pitching has been good, maybe not great. But this will be an interesting one, too. Georgia and Athens. Boy, if you're Georgia, you really want to get that one this weekend.
Yeah, after they dropped the series to Tech, I think this is one that I want to say this is the only ranked series among SEC teams this week, which there's a lot of debate about whether or not Mississippi State should still be ranked. But as of now, that's the only 2 ranked ones. And if you're Georgia, I feel like this is, if nothing else, just a big confidence boost. If you can get one, it is against, a quote unquote name brand. It does make you feel good. They do have a number by their name. So I think this is big. Cannon's been really, really good for them. Like you mentioned, we expected pitching to be kind of a strength to that staff. Maybe not quite as strong as we thought they would be. And that can still change. The guys are figuring stuff out. It's still early. So a State offense that's struggled but starting to feel like it might be turning a corner. I think that's a really interesting one to keep an eye on this weekend, and definitely one of the probably top 2 or 3 to have circled.
Okay, Florida goes to Alabama. We haven't talked about the Gators. We talked about this pre-podcast. Feels to me Florida some days seems a little bit ahead of schedule because they got a young team. Judd Fabian's hitting again for them a little bit. Alabama better than we thought they'd be. The pitching in particular. I meant to bring Alabama staff up too. I think the way that they have found some arms too that we didn't know they'd necessarily have so far it has been encouraging. But I think that's a good series too.
Yeah, no, Alabama pitched it really, really well in their trip to Texas. You look at the wins and losses, it didn't go how they wanted, but they were in every one of those games late and probably should have gotten at least one of those. I think their team ERA is right at 3, which is top 5, top 6 in the SEC as of right now. I do think Florida, like you mentioned, they do feel like they've got some guys that have made the steps and made the jumps that you kind of wanted to see. Barco and Sproat are both really, really good. If those 2 are looking like they have so far this year, they're going to be tough to beat in a series. I think they've got to combine like 60 to 8 strikeout to walk ratio, sub 2 ERA. So that's kind of a really nice 1-2 punch. And then they're hitting really well. I know it's still early, and they've actually played a little bit better competition than some of the other teams. Liberty might not be the name that everybody thinks of, but they lost that series at Liberty, but Liberty's a ranked team, and they go on the road, take a series at Miami, and that's just let's see, Sterling Thompson, Colby Halter, Langford, they're all hitting above 350, and Fabian, that's a guy that last year everybody thought was going to be the SEC Player of the Year. hits 20 home runs, but just strikes out a ton, and the average isn't there. So far, he's hitting 310 with 6 home runs, and he's actually got more walks and strikeouts this year, which is something that I think any Florida fan would take if you would have told them. So that's a good trend for him.
We hadn't talked about Vandy much. Vandy's really got some pitching depth, and Carter Holton will be in that freshman of the year conversation.
He will.
He's near the top. I'm seeing where he is in ERA. It's close, and I know he's leading Vanderbilt in ERA. I think he's at about $1.10. That's where Patrick Riley is. But actually, you know what? I think Holton's leading the league in strikeouts or close to it. He's near the top in some board. I'm stumbling here, but he's really good. Yeah. 35 in strikeouts. That's third behind Dollander at Tennessee. Another guy we should have talked about and didn't, and Parker Stinnett. But
that's as a freshman too. I mean, I know he's looked really good. He had that first outing against Oklahoma State, where the stat line's probably not indicative of how good he was. To everybody that watched, it was like, the stuff's there. That's going to click at some point. It sounds like each week he keeps getting a little bit better. I think it was out at Hawaii. He was perfect for 6 innings in a 7-inning game, and I think he ended up giving up a home run or giving up a run or something like that. But just another dominant outing, and it seems like he's just another one of kind of another one in line at Vandy that's a freshman that's just all world.
And had a no-hitter through 5 last week too. So
just keep following it up.
Now, I mean, it was against Wagner, but still, for freshmen, you take it. I mean, they're really deep. Their defense hadn't been there yet, and I think that'll come. The lineup feels like it's starting to come together a little bit more. Vandy's not a team, and you look at the big conversation. When we do offense, we talk about LSU, Ole Miss, Arkansas, but Vandy's a good hitting team too. Kind of dominated that series with Missouri. That's a lot for Missouri to bite off coming to Nashville to open the SEC season.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Missouri's done good, but they've played a pretty weak slate so far. Crazier things have happened, but I imagine they're going to get. That's kind of quite the step up in competition compared to what they've seen the first 4 weeks.
Let's see. We got a couple left. A&M at LSU. Want to see what happens with money this weekend? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like that's one of those. It just feels like LSU is going to kind of overwhelm A&M from an offensive standpoint. I don't know if A&M can keep up. Now, if Money's not able to go and he's out, maybe A&M's got a puncher's chance there. But LSU hasn't looked the greatest outside of Money and then defensively. So maybe things get a little weird there. Maybe A&M's able to manufacture some things and put some pressure on them. But as of right now, it just feels like that. LSU's going to do what they've had to do a lot this year, and that's just going to be outscore people, which it feels like they're perfectly capable of doing.
You talk about surprises. Here's an unpleasant one. And I know LSU wasn't one of the top defensive teams maybe in the league coming in, but they had made 29 errors, fielding 952. They give you some opportunities, and A&M, honestly, right now, it feels like A&M's going to need some to score against much of anybody because they're just not hitting.
Yeah, it definitely does. And like I said, that might be one of those going in. I'm sure that's, no shock to them. So they may try to put some extra emphasis on that, some hit and runs, pressure on that defense. Because I think it was the third game at the Shriners Classic where LSU has like 5 errors and just looks really, really sloppy. That game at La Tech, granted, I think it was like 20 degrees and there's, college kids draped over the outfield wall screaming at them, but they kind of booted it around there too. So that's kind of been their Achilles heel so far in some of these losses we've seen.
Kentucky and Arkansas wraps it up. I think that'll be intriguing too. Kentucky is really hit. Now the pitching scares me a little bit, and I think in that ballpark sometimes it can get out of there. But boy, Kentucky's got some. It just seems like you look in the lineup every weekend, and Estep's got 3 hits, and Plastiak's got a bomb and 4 RBIs, and they just the top of their orders hit really well. Arkansas, the bats have not hit like I think we thought they would, and now I think the pitching's been encouraging. You wondered losing Paulette, how would that go? But I think they pieced it together. Again, that's one I think would be more interesting in Kentucky, but it's interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, agreed. We didn't do a pod after weekend 3. That's when I was gonna, declare that Kentucky had the non-conference win of the year for the SEC, and then South Carolina follows that up with a win for number 1 Texas. But Kentucky did take 2 of 3 from TCU, which was really loud. We've seen them start strong in non-conference before, and then kind of, whether it was, I want to say they had North Carolina scheduled one year, they've had another series at TCU where they kind of, falter a little bit, but that was a great series win. And I think I got a stat, they're second in the league in runs scored, but they've given up the most. So that's kind of one of those. It feels like they're going to play a lot of 12 to 10 ball games this year, which I think that's something, given the way the season's gone, they might be comfortable with. But I don't know if that's a winning strategy in SEC play. We did mention Arkansas hasn't hit it quite as well as we would have thought. I still think they seem to be getting back on track. I still think there's too much talent in that offense for it not to eventually click. The transfers they've gotten have been huge. Turner and Lanzilli, I think they lead the team in average. Those two do. And then Caden Wallace has been really good. I think it was this past weekend. He hit grand slams on back-to-back days. So it feels like they're starting to turn the corner, and the wheels are in motion there. We'll be interested to see how they do against Kentucky, because like we said, Kentucky doesn't have the greatest staff in the conference, but it's still going to be a step up from some of the stuff they've seen in non-conference. So I do think that's one to keep an eye on. But like you mentioned, I think if that was in Lexington, it might be a little bit more enticing than at Baum-Walker.
Okay, William, let's make some quick picks. Who wins the series? Let's start. Let's go back to the top. Ole Miss and Auburn.
This is I'm going to give my best Lee Corso, not so fast, but I'm not picking against Ole Miss, but as he would say, closer than the experts think. I think Ole Miss gets 2 or 3, but I think that's one of those, when that weekend's over, they're glad they got 2 or 3, and in the road in this conference, that seems to be the story anywhere. But I think they get their first one since 2009.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Okay, South Carolina at Tennessee. Hard to pick against the Vols in Knoxville.
Yeah, I think I'm going with them. That was a really strong series from South Carolina against Texas. And I saw some South Carolina fans. Where are we in the rankings? Where is this? And that's questions you should be asking after a series like that. But I think you've got to prove it more than one weekend. They look pretty pedestrian in that series against Clemson. So I'm still going to go Tennessee. South Carolina's got a chance to make a huge statement. We'll see how that pitching staff does. It's been pretty shaky. If they can tighten that up, that'll be very encouraging. But given what we've seen, I'm not going against Tennessee yet.
Yeah, Carolina's plus 24 in the league in run differential. That's 13th. They're better than A&M, and that's it. So there needs to be a little more body of work there. Let's not take away from what they did, but that's your reason. It hasn't been that dominating. Okay, where are we at? Mississippi State and Georgia. Again, State's in a little bit of a tough spot. Georgia's at home. Georgia feels like the pick, but I think there's room for debate here.
Yeah, I think this is the one that I've kind of waffled back and forth on the most. I think we were off air talking about it. I think if they get game 1 with Cannon, I don't think I trust State's offense or bullpen enough to win 2 in a row on the road. They just seem to kind of be Jekyll and Hyde. Either the offense hits and the bullpen falls apart, or vice versa. If State gets that Friday game, I think I'd lean them. But with Cannon on the mound, State unsure of some things, I think I'm leaning Georgia.
Yeah, we're in agreement. 3 for 3 so far. Florida goes to Alabama. Alabama's offense has been a little disappointing. Hadn't scored a ton of runs. I just think Florida, and I know Alabama's pitched it well, but I just trust Florida's arms a little bit more in this one, and maybe the bats too.
Yeah, and this is another one of those that there's a lot of people that are just going to look at this and think, it's Florida. Alabama doesn't have a chance. I think Alabama is better than some people give them credit for. But like you mentioned, I think it's just kind of one of those where they're a little bit outmatched. that Florida staff, but with Barco and Sproat, I think that's going to kind of be the difference, and I'll go Florida as well.
Yeah, Sproat. That's another thing. Sproat seems to have put it together at times this year, and that was an arm that they thought could be a first rounder. When a guy pops up in summer ball and flashes, I'm more skeptical of that than some other people. I'm like, you got to show me in the SEC first, and the fact that he started to do it some, to me, elevates Florida. You know, we thought Florida was a team that would maybe be there at season's end, but might take a while. That the way Sproat's thrown at times, to me, makes me a little more bullish on them right now.
Agreed. Yeah, and I know that Miami series, they lose the game Barco starts and still end up winning that series. I think that's super encouraging because, that's one of those that, kind of like we're talking about Georgia and Cannon, it feels like they've really got to get that Friday win to get it done. But, they lose with Barco on the mound and turn around and respond and win the next two. So I think that was super encouraging to see.
All right. Missouri at Vandy, A&M at LSU. I think we can take the drama out of those. I don't see either of the home teams losing those.
Yeah, I think we're in alignment there at LSU and Vandy. Not to say things can't happen, but I don't think we're picking against them.
Well, and same thing in Arkansas. Again, a lot of things to like about Kentucky. Arkansas may not have been as impressive as we would have liked to have seen based on our expectations, but you're not picking against the Hogs in Baum.
Agreed. Yeah, and I would say, Arkansas and Ole Miss are kind of the two that, keep an eye on. Don't, just assume those are going to go the way everybody thinks. Week one can always be a little tricky in the SEC, but I don't have enough to actually pick against those teams. Just kind of worth watching and monitoring as it goes.
William, it's been fun. Got to cut it a little short tonight because I've got to do a basketball podcast. We're going to do a live stream here in a few minutes, and by the time you see this will have already taken place. But it's 880 Central here, man, with basketball and baseball, and we're going to have more baseball content than we've had. It's just only so many hours in the day for both of us right now. But as soon as basketball's over, it's going to be full on baseball, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is, and one of the things I wanted to add, if you're one of the folks that tune in specifically for baseball, Chris and Blake, they do a really great job on basketball. I know there's a handful of fan bases that might be a little checked out in basketball right now, but they're going to have some coaching search stuff, some tournament stuff, and we're kind of hitting on all cylinders over here, and they've got some great stuff, so definitely worth checking out. The
way it's gone this last week or two, somebody probably fired a basketball coach while we're doing this.
I would not put it past them.
Yeah. Well, William, you do a great job. Tell folks about your Twitter account quickly. We're going to do a lot of cool stuff again once our focus is more on baseball and basketball's done. It's not going to stop us between now and then, but just, again, to let you guys know there's going to be a lot more coming on baseball. And tell folks about your Twitter account really quickly.
Yeah, I run the SEC Baseball Twitter account. Things are picking up with SEC play. Just a lot of informal, having fun on social media, stuff like that. We're hoping to, since I'm partnering with Southeastern 14, to do a little bit more and kind of up our coverage game, do some Twitter spaces, stuff like that during some of these games. So excited for conference play to really get going so we can have some fun.
Yeah, can't wait to see it this weekend. He's William Drummond. I'm Chris Lee. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again with some more baseball coverage next week.